All right, welcome to the show. Happy New Year, everybody. 2026, the first edition of this year for others receiving votes. I'm Pat Forde, joined as always by Gene Wojciechowski and Bryan Fischer. And there is a lot of college football to discuss. A ton of stuff has happened. Obviously, the playoff has advanced in some interesting, surprising, momentous ways to a Final Four. Also, the portal has roared to life, and we've had some interesting things happening there. We're going to make some overreactions and some accurate assertions, one or the other, maybe both, actually maybe neither, about the playoff, the state of the sport. We will break down the two semifinals, and we'll pick them. We'll look at Indiana's incredible transfer portal haul, and we'll make some New Year's resolutions. So, gentlemen, by the way, I do need to, of course, pass along the update that I dominated the picks in the quarterfinals, getting 3 out of 4, while neither of you did that. So, just in case you hadn't kept up, I'm here for you.
I couldn't hear you. We had an audio issue there, Pat. Sorry.
I'll remind you later.
Okay.
The kind of thing that deserves to be brought up more than once in a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, anyway, the Final Four matchups are set, and wow, very interesting. We have a Fiesta Bowl matching Mississippi and Miami, and we have a Peach Bowl matching Oregon and Indiana. Not what people saw coming when the bracket came out, certainly not what they saw coming when the season started. Looking at this, Gene, looking who's in and who's out, give me a reaction or accurate assertion. Tell me what this statement is, one or the other. The Final Four signals regime change in college football.
I would say it's accurate, but with an asterisk, if I'm allowed to do that, because we had 2 Big Ten teams last year in the Final Four. We have 2 Big Ten teams in the Final Four this year. We had 1 SEC team in the Final Four last year. We have 1 SEC team in the Final Four this year. We had 1 team last year, Notre Dame, kind of, different kind of team in a way. We have Miami this year, different kind of team, different kind of journey this year. So if you're going from big picture, I think it's kind of the same. But when you dig a little deeper and look at the teams that are in there and the teams that are not in there, the storylines, you mentioned, back in August when we first started this podcast and we were making our silly predictions about who was going to reach the championship game and who was going to make a run. I don't think we had any of these teams in it, did we? I know I didn't, at least in the championship game. So, regime change in that sense, absolutely. So, and I think it's going to continue. I think every year we're going to get more surprises or so-called surprises than we have in the past.
Well, we got a 3/4 chance of possibly having our first-time national champion since Florida back in '96. So I think that does kind of signal, hey, there's some new kids on the block at least now. So I think that's important to keep in mind. And look, a lot of these programs, I think they are reaffirming that if you invest in football, you can kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I mean, Indiana was the losingest program in all of FBS coming into this season. And now here they are, 2 games away from winning the national title. Like to wrap your mind around that kind of takes a little bit of kind of a disbelief, even if you had told somebody at midseason. And the same for Ole Miss. I mean, the chance to possibly win without your head coach in the playoff itself. I think would have been anathema to anybody picking the Rebels outside of those that were wearing powder blue, certainly in New Orleans this weekend. So, I think for a lot of people, this does kind of signal that this is an open era of college football. Part of that's Nick Saban's retiring. A lot of the old guard has been shuffled out. Obviously there's transfer portal changes to where you can flip over your roster pretty quickly. But I think the biggest thing is that if you invest, if you find the right coach, anybody can win. That's the change in this era of college football. And part of that's, yes, you got to win a couple of games in the college football playoff. And I think there was an initial thinking that saying, all all right, that's just going to reaffirm Georgia and Ohio State and Alabama, all those teams that recruited talent class after class after class, all those 5 stars. That would be a big factor in them actually winning more of those games. Well, we've seen that has not been the case, at least through the first 2 years of this 12-team playoff. And so I think it's kind of a not necessarily a complete regime change, because we did see some of those blue bloods, but it has given the opportunity to programs out there. And I think that's the biggest thing that of this new era in college football. It's given an opportunity, and that's huge for a lot of teams, and it's huge for the sport itself, because it does mean that everybody can go into the season almost like an NFL team with a little bit of hope.
Yeah, good points from both of you guys. I hate to admit, but accurate with an asterisk, I think, is a good way to put it, because this doesn't all of a sudden mean that Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia are dead by any means. It just means that there's more opportunity for more people, and so that's what I think is fantastic about it, is that for the reasons you guys enumerated, just about everybody out there, if you hit it right, and that's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy to hit it right, but if you get the right coach and you make the right moves in the portal and you add in solid high school recruiting, then everybody's got a chance, and because everybody's got more money now. So this is an intriguing era. I don't think it, like I said, it doesn't mean that we're never going to see the blue bloods back on top again by any stretch. But I think it just means that going into every year, there should be who knows how many teams, maybe 20 that say, maybe 30, maybe 40 that say this could be our chance. I feel like that's actually possible. Bryan, it is funny. I got to add this. So back at the beginning of the season, like in sometime July and August, we were trying to formulate the top 25, and I came up with some kind of harebrained formula for like trying to rank the teams. And I had the initial run of this, I had Indiana at like 4th, and I was like, no, that's crazy. We can't do that. And we kept them at 10th, which I think was higher than anybody. But I underrated them when I had them 4th even. It's crazy. I mean, it's just unbelievable how things can come together for schools. So
well, and Pat, remember, we would sit there before a season would start and say, who are the teams that can truly win a national championship? And it was usually the usual suspects, right? Maybe with one or two you'd throw in there as semi-long shots. But now, to your point, 40 doesn't sound like such a crazy number anymore of teams that could legitimately make some sort of bizarre run if NIL and the portal gods smile on them. And so it has, in a weird way, expanded the possibilities, but maybe on the flip side, also restricted other programs from having any chance. I mean, look at what's happening with Iowa State and its roster, and we can go down a list of programs that are just getting decimated by portal and NIL restrictions. So, but crazy, yes, absolutely.
No, I mean, and you're right about some people being decimated by this, but I'm not sure those programs ever had a chance to begin with. I mean, Iowa State technically did, because they did make a Big 12 championship game not that long ago. But, I just think that there's still some of that layer of Power 4 that you technically have a chance, but you gotta again get things really right. And Indiana should be your rallying cry.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. What's the difference between Iowa State and Indiana a few years ago? Okay, fair enough. Matt Campbell, though, I thought we loved him.
I mean, Matt Campbell's a great coach, and he did awfully well to get Iowa State to a Big 12 championship game. So, all right, next dramatic statement: the SEC is dead, or at least in critical condition, and in part because it has no longer cornered the market on paying players. Bryan, Fischer, overreaction or accurate assertion?
So this one's a tough one. I want to kind of middle it a little bit. I will go slight overreaction, if you will, just because to call the SEC dead in a place where the sport means so much, where there is so much investment, when there's so much buy-in, alignment, as we like to always call the buzzword, from the top down. These are a lot of schools. All 14 of them really, or all 16 of them, excuse me, that really want to win in football. That is crucial for the SEC, and that's crucial for their identity. So I don't think it's dead, but it is definitely a speed bump. And you look at some of the head coaching hires that have not panned out in the league, the lack of good quarterback play. I think that has been another issue that the SEC has had to deal with these last couple of years. They've not really had those elite guys. I think the talent gap certainly has closed with certainly their peer conference in the Big Ten, and really the depth of the SEC. I think that was a big talking point this year. Bowl season has kind of exposed that a little bit. Maybe Tennessee, maybe Missouri, those teams that were ranked and valued by not only by the committee but by the polls earlier in the season, maybe not quite as good as we thought they really were when we kind of look back in retrospect and look at their entire body of work. To borrow a committee term, it's really, that is the issue for the SEC. They used to have elite programs. They did not have elite programs this year. That's been their biggest flaw, if you will, these last really the last 2-3 years. They've not had that juggernaut that they can really hang their hat on, and that did a lot for the brand reputation of the SEC. And they have not had that. It's nice to have depth. But the elite teams, as we've seen with the Big Ten, as we've seen, with Ohio State winning the national title, with Indiana making this run, with Oregon making this run, it helps to have an elite team, and they've not just had that. I think Georgia's been kind of the closest in terms of winning their 2 back-to-back SEC titles, but we've seen them go one and done in the playoffs. So the SEC is not dead by any means, but you know what, they're teetering, if you will. And you look a lot at the head coaching lineup. I think that has been a big issue for the conference. They've had a lot of places have turned over. That's kind of added and subtracted in a lot of ways. They have not had the quarterback play, like I mentioned earlier. So the SEC, they're taking their slings and arrows. But if anybody can kind of bounce back up from the mat, you'd probably expect a lot of these SEC programs to do just that.
Dead as in total world dominance, I think it's an accurate statement. Dead as in can't win a national championship this year. Remember, Ole Miss is still in it. Next year, the years following, can't be in contention for that. I think it's a huge overreaction. If you just even think back at the playoff selection, even if you don't think Bama should have been in the field, there are still more SEC teams than there were Big Ten teams. The quarterback situation, I would respectfully disagree with you a little bit, Bryan, on that. I don't think quarterback play was the real issue in the SEC. If you go down the roster of quarterbacks in that league, there are some very, very good ones. But Mendoza was the Heisman Trophy winner, and he's from the Big Ten. Big Ten and the SEC still control sort of the playoff format, so to speak. So the SEC still is a power broker, and I think the SEC will adapt, just like the Big Ten adapted. The SEC isn't just going to sit there and go, yeah, it's all yours. We're good. We had our run back in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s. We're good. You guys go ahead. They are going to do something. They're going to be proactive, and they will figure out a way to get back into this mix. But dead, too strong of a word, overreaction.
Yeah, I agree that they're not dead, clearly. And for the reasons that were stated, mostly that they just simply care too much and couldn't stand to be dead, right? Those schools will do whatever it takes to reassert themselves. It matters too much. It does mean more, frankly. It's a good tagline for their slogan, and it's been used against them lately, but it does mean more. So the SEC will be back. But, this is a little bit of an inflection point and a crisis point. We'll see if Mississippi wins the title. It's actually a massive flex for the league because it's a mid-tier to maybe even lower third program historically and in terms of resources and that sort of thing, that all of a sudden could win a national championship. And then you're saying, well, we can win with Georgia, we can win with Alabama, we can win with Auburn, Tennessee, LSU. Why not win with Mississippi too? So
We'll see.
If they do it, then we're having a completely different conversation. I don't think they'll do it. So if they don't, then sorry, this is a storyline that's going to continue and perpetuate. Now, the part of this here that I added in there, because it has no longer cornered the market on paying players. That is not an accurate statement because a lot of people were paying players for a long time. Maybe the SEC was doing it more than other places. Maybe the old "if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying" slogan was accurate. But does the name Nevin Shapiro ring a bell at Miami? Free Shoes University?
SMU?
Yeah, the entire state of Texas at one point or another. Come on now. Let's be a little bit realistic there. That's where I think there's just been this generalization. And it is something that I've seen from a lot of anonymous sources chirping up with that. And I think that I'd like to see people put names with it, and then we'd look at their school and say, you know what? There might have been something there too. So has it made a difference to a degree? Yeah, it's probably been a bit of a leveling factor. But I don't think the SEC had completely cornered the market on paying players through the back door, as Ed Orgeron put it recently.
Well, and Pat also, I mean, I don't have the numbers right in front of me. Maybe you can recall them by memory, but whatever the numbers were, the SEC had won X number of national championships over the past X number of years. It was a lot. They were the dominant force in college football by every conceivable metric. And there was a certain arrogance in that, beginning with "it just means more." And so I think other conferences, other coaches are taking great glee in how this has evolved in the last few years. And everybody's getting their punches in. And that's fine. That's how it goes. So I do think there's a little bit of, all right, they're down a little bit. We're gonna celebrate that, just as they celebrated their many victories and championships.
Sure. 13 out of 19, I think 7 in a row at one point.
Thank you.
3 different schools in 3 different years, 19, 20, and 21. You know, yes, there's been a lot for them to celebrate, and they have. And you're right that, guess what? When you carry yourself with that level of arrogance, people like to see you stumble and will point that out to you. So the flip side of that is our next statement, overreaction or accurate assertion: the Big Ten rules the sport. I think that is, geez, I hate to go middle ground on these because that's not good podcasting, but I'm kind of going middle ground, you know? We'll see again. Now we'll see if the winner of Oregon, Indiana wins the national championship, which I do think has a very good chance of happening. And they've won 3 different titles with 3 different schools, then yeah, the Big Ten rules the sport. Accurate assertion. If it doesn't happen, we'll reframe and recalibrate and have another discussion. But the one thing that we have seen from one of the Big Ten's issues historically, I guess, is that they lack real depth in terms of outstanding teams. The fact that the Oregon is playing Indiana to represent the conference is an indication that there's more depth. It still is not incredibly deep, I don't think, but there is more depth there, that if either one of those schools goes on and wins and follows Michigan and Ohio State for the championship, and Penn State making a semifinal last year, then now you're talking, okay, geez, we got 5-6 teams, and frankly, Iowa showed up big in its bowl game. Illinois showed up big in its bowl game, and that's another famous SEC trick, is the bowl game. The record in the bowl games matters until we say it doesn't matter because our players didn't play, or we're only interested in the playoff. It always counts, man. If your uniform's out there playing, we're keeping score, there's a scoreboard, then it's going to come up. And the Big Ten's had a very good bowl season, and the SEC has not. So how's that for I'm afraid, a largely half-baked answer? Somebody give me a better answer.
Go ahead, Bryan.
Well, the Big Ten rules the sport because they control the format of the playoff. You know, they are the 2-time reigning national champion. You know, a lot of things run through Tony Petitti's office right now. So I think it's a very accurate statement at this point, much to the chagrin to a lot of people out there. And the talk in terms of the roster spending, there's a lot of Big Ten teams that are spending quite a bit of money. You heard a lot about Ohio State's roster last year, how much they spent. You heard a lot about Oregon, what they're doing in NIL. And Pat, to your depth question, I think that the Big Ten is actually preparing itself well. You just spend a lot of that media money on that depth. You look at USC, number one recruiting class that just won 9 games this year. Maybe that's another program that can kind of live up to the actual national brand that the Trojans have built. Certainly Washington took a step forward this year under Jed Fish after taking that step back from the national title game a couple of years ago and turning over the roster. I think you mentioned Illinois, Iowa, Michigan State just hiring Pat Fitzgerald. You got changes at Michigan, with Kyle Whittingham. I think he can get that program back on track, and that's a program that already just won 9 games this year. So I think the depth there for the Big Ten is coming along quite nicely, and I think it is a reflection of that to have Oregon and Indiana one win away from the national title for the both of them. So the Big Ten depth here is coming into play, but this is also a conference that I think is turning into a bit of really embodying what they've wanted to become, which is good in a lot of sports. I think you look at basketball. I think there's a lot of basketball programs there that are having some good years in the Big Ten. Maybe they get off the snide there. I know we're not talking about basketball in this podcast quite a bit just yet, but this is a lot of programs out there want to do well in a lot of sports, and now they've kind of got the backing to ride the football coattails. So they're investing in that and all those other sports. I think the Big Ten is starting to throw their weight around, and I think the only thing that can disrupt that is just the not having the unanimity, if you will, in the Big Ten itself. That's been the problem that I think we've seen the last couple of months, certainly in the last couple of years, that the SEC does not have a problem with. They all seem to get their ducks in a row when it does come time to sit down there and actually vote on any of these topics or any of these issues. That has not been the case in the Big Ten. So that's the only thing that maybe prevents the Big Ten from truly ruling the sport, is if they were all moving in one direction. We saw that with the private equity deal. There's some fractions in that conference, and that's probably the only thing that's kind of holding it back from truly throwing its weight around and ruling the sport.
I think this is an overreaction. Do they rule the sport? I think they are equals. I think you can easily say the Big Ten and the SEC are equals, just as they are equals and now sort of ruling the playoff format. They are the two conferences that decide that. If you look at attendance, I think the SEC still has the upper hand slightly. If nothing else, they're comparable. If you look at TV ratings, yes, the Big Ten had the top 2 games this season, but after that, the SEC clobbered the Big Ten when it came to TV ratings. If you look at recruiting, Bryan mentioned it. USC's ranked number 1, Oregon's ranked number 2, Ohio State's ranked number 9, but then the rest of the top 10 or top 9 are all SEC teams. I'm just not ready to say that the Big Ten is sitting on the throne and everybody else is bending the knee. I think the SEC is still there with them, but you can't deny what the Big Ten has accomplished and what it still might accomplish here in the weeks to come. And so that's huge. But am I ready to say that the Big Ten rules the world? No, not just yet.
Okay. One other point I want to bring up here in terms of what might matter for the long term. And other people have done the research on this because I'm too lazy and I have not. But there's been, the number of like millionaire alums from each school is higher in the Big Ten than it is in the SEC. There's more rich alums. That doesn't mean they all care about football, but it does give you more potential avenues to break in more money because Lord knows they don't have enough with that terrible TV contract.
And the population centers in the Big Ten are, there's no denying it.
And companies, look at some of the big companies that are in the Big Ten footprint, and they're in, as much as we like to deride Kevin Warren's thinking in terms of expansion, and they are in the 3 biggest media markets in the country. And I think that does matter, when it comes to some of the dollars and cents that they can reroute to now their rosters. That is a factor.
Yep. Good points, gentlemen. All right, next, Gene Wojciechowski. Indiana is the clear national championship favorite. Overreaction or accurate assertion?
I think it's accurate. I mean, I've had to reprogram my brain like a lot of other college football people these last 2 years. If you close your eyes and cross out the letters IU and just look at what they've accomplished, it's absolutely accurate. If you if you rank the 4 teams left in this championship race, Indiana has to be the favorite. I believe Bill Conley, who's a huge analytics guy over at ESPN, he has them as 40% and change as the favorites. I can't disagree with any of that. What it has accomplished, what you go by any test, eye test, metric test, they have to be the favorites. But it's still taking my brain a little time to just accept that. And I know that's counterintuitive. If you just watch them play, if you look at the numbers, it's a no-brainer. They're absolutely the favorite. But it's taken a while. Not just for me, I'm sure for a lot of people. I know you, Pat, have totally been on this train from day one, and I applaud you. You saw things that a lot of us didn't see or just wouldn't accept or acknowledge. And so will they win it? I don't know. Anything's possible. Miami was a 9.5 point underdog. They won. Things happen in these games, but are they the favorite right now? Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, they're the number 1 seed. They're the Heisman Trophy winner. They have the number 3 scoring offense in the country and the number 2 scoring defense in the country. They're a great team. They have a great coach. They have great players, and they're playing with this confidence that honestly, even with all the other teams in there, I don't think they can match, and I think they've gone through a difficult road to get here. They did beat Ohio State. They beat Alabama back to back. I think that gives them even more confidence going into this matchup with a team that they have beaten before in Oregon on the road in Autzen, which we all know is a very difficult place to play. Now it's going to be in a neutral site at a place that a lot of Indiana fans are going to be able to drive to or fly to pretty easily there in Atlanta. So I think it is clearly the favorite, and probably is whoever wins that game in the Peach Bowl is going to be the clear favorite. But we have seen crazier things happen. But it is Gene, your sigh early on, I think that does capture a lot of just the conflicts that people are feeling right now about the Hoosiers.
I don't mean it in a bad way either, Bryan.
No, nobody is either. I think it's just like you decades and decades of conditioning that this is a basketball school. And to have them do this, I mean, that Pat has written this before. I mean, this is truly one of the greatest coaching turnarounds, in the history of the sport. This is one of the greatest runs in the history of the sport. When you look at just this 2-year stretch that Curt Cignetti has been able to assemble. So not only are they the clear favorite, but I think they're one of the best stories that we've ever seen in the last 3-4 decades of college sports.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. It is not an overreaction. It's an accurate statement. It does not mean they will win the championship, but they are the clear favorite. And I was in Pasadena talking to people, and I've just been preoccupied with the Indiana story in general. And the question is, they just keep circulating: what's the secret sauce? How are they doing it? The answer, well, there's probably multiple answers, but one key part of this, and it does underscore exactly how good Curt Cignetti and his staff are at coaching. This team is so buttoned up, it's ridiculous. They have lost 1 fumble this year. In the first game of the season, in the first half, they've had 900-plus offensive snaps since then without a fumble. They've dropped the ball a couple times, but they've recovered it every time. So they've lost 1 fumble. They have 8 turnovers. They are second in the nation in penalty yardage at just 27 yards per game. They have almost no 15-yard penalties. The penalties they get are false start, occasional holding. They don't commit pass interference. They have 6 dropped passes this season. I went to IU and I'm like, you guys never dropped the pass. Do you have stats on that? They're like, yeah, we've dropped 6. It's like, what? We've seen teams drop 6 in a game. They've dropped 6 all year. They don't screw up on special teams. They're just so airtight, it's unbelievable. And that goes back to coaching. That's Cignetti and that's his staff. And that is just coaching in complete attention to detail that I just find incredibly impressive from Indiana. So absolutely the favorite. At this point, I'll be surprised if they don't win it, but we've seen plenty of surprises so far. All right, Bryan, LSU allegedly is trying to get back some of its coaches that are on loan to Ole Miss, who used to coach at Ole Miss. There were many of them they're doing double duty, flying back and forth, Oxford, Baton Rouge. They had a big portal visit weekend, and they wanted their coaches there for that. Is trying to get them to retire from Ole Miss a snake move, overreaction, or accurate assertion?
I would go overreaction on this one because let's face it, they are LSU coaches too. And you know what? The portal is open. They have to build their roster for next year. That is a factor in all this. I think it's just bad optics, certainly. You know, and I think that, you know, if Greg Sankey could have stepped in, if the two ADs could have actually come to a nice little resolution and saying, here's the plan, here's the game plan, putting aside both of their head coaches to get involved, where I think the feelings are a little bit heated on all sides. You know, this is just a quirk. And I think it is also a reflection that Lane Kiffin didn't think that Ole Miss was going to go this far. He thought he was going to get his assistants after this game. They're going to make that nice drive up to Baton Rouge from New Orleans after the Sugar Bowl. But this is a reflection of really just this incredible Ole Miss run. And I give credit to Pete Golding. I mean, the players are bought in. They are excited about this run. Like there's a confidence in that locker room that I don't know if it was there kind of before they won that Tulane game. Certainly before what they did in Georgia in the second half. Like this is an impressive job by that coaching staff. And let's face it, they are burning some fuel in terms of those private planes going back and forth between Baton Rouge and Oxford, or doing that drive. I mean, it is a testament to a lot of the coaches that they are even able to manage this at some point. But at the end of the day, I understand where Lane Kiffin's coming from. He wants his assistants there when those guys are coming in for portal visits, when high schoolers are coming in. Obviously, there's a second signing period as well. So, I get it from that standpoint. It's just the optics, look terrible. And I think that is just kind of a reflection of the most awkward situation that we could have ever expected. Not only in this playoff, but I think anybody could have, given that you leave your head coach and he leaves for a rival, on the eve of the playoff. That's just a reflection of that.
Bryan puts it perfectly, I think, and frames it really well. If Indiana, Pat, is one of the great stories we've ever seen, then what we're seeing with Ole Miss and LSU and this whole assistant coaching thing is one of the most bizarre stories we've ever seen. Lane Kiffin, by the way, if Ole Miss wins, gets another $750,000 in bonus money from LSU as part of his deal for leaving Ole Miss. So that's bizarre. So the fact that Lane Kiffin, talk about conflicted feelings, in a way, maybe he doesn't want Ole Miss to win, but another way he gets $750,000 more on top of the other money he's gotten, bonuses from Ole Miss's wins. So it's a bizarre thing. I don't know what the situation really is. The reporting that I've read is just fuzzy enough that I'm not sure who's stopping whom and who feels this way. I do know this. If Charlie Weiss ends up coaching in this next game, and it appears he's going to do, that's the key guy. That's the guy that really matters. So if LSU is still letting Charlie Weiss coach Ole Miss, that's a huge deal. Secondly, and I don't want to put too fine of a point on it, but has Pete Golding ever said thank you to LSU for sort of loaning these assistants to Ole Miss? I'm not saying he has to do it, but maybe it'd be kind of a nice gesture. Just as it might be a nice gesture from Lane Kiffin to finally just come out and say, hey, they're good. We'll figure it out. I'm rooting for my former Ole Miss players. I mean, somebody take the high ground here. And I'm not sure we've really seen that in a way. So I'm going to say overreaction also. But it is just the strangest story, and I don't know how it's going to figure out. And I'm not sure anybody knows who's going to show up for this next game as far as assistant coaches are concerned.
Yeah, we'll go see who's on the plane, who gets off the team plane when they land in the desert. Bryan, go check it out.
Well, it's funny because number one, I don't think anybody at Ole Miss is going to say thank you to LSU. I think that we can put that.
You know what I mean, though, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
but there's definitely some level, and it just was awkward. They're at the Sugar Bowl after the game. I mean, Frank Wilson, who is LSU's interim head coach, who's going to Ole Miss to join that staff. He's wearing an Ole Miss sweatshirt. He's on the field celebrating with players that he's not coached. And the guy who's taking his job in LSU is obviously going the other way from Oxford. So it is just an awkward situation, but it's also one that Oregon is dealing with. I mean, they have both of their coordinators are recruiting other players while they're there in Eugene. They're trying to assemble staff. So it's not limited necessarily to Ole Miss LSU. It's just the awkwardness of the situation, given the playoff and given the timing too, given the close proximity between the quarterfinal round and the semifinal round. I don't think it's helped anybody with the calendar.
Yeah, I mean it's an absurd mess that is only in college football, really only in the SEC kind of situation. It seems like to me, but my very strong thinking is you finish the job, and so if you've told them go help them in the playoffs, you coach the playoffs till the playoffs over.
Fair enough. Yeah.
To your point, Gene, the reporting is fuzzy enough. It's not clear. There's not a lot of clarity. What is driving the decisions? Who is driving it? Who's coming? Who's going? Who's staying? This is all kind of been pretty vaguely handled. But my feeling definitely is like if the premise all along was coach Ole Miss in the playoffs, then Ole Miss is still playing in the playoffs. Keep coaching them.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Last thing here, and we'll hit it quickly, and then we will talk a little more about the actual semifinal games. Alabama did not have the biggest flop of the quarterfinals. Overreaction or accurate assertion? I say it's an accurate assertion because, first of all, I expected Alabama to lose and perhaps lose badly. To the point Gene is making from people who have watched college football for 50 years or 60 or 70 or 80, it is still hard to get your mind around Indiana completely dominating them. But Alabama wasn't very good this year. So I was not shocked to see them get trucked. Saw them get trucked in the SEC championship game too. To me, the one that shocked me was Ohio State and just not showing up ready. Whether that's layoff or whether that was being kind of overwhelmed by the athleticism and the power of Miami's defensive front, I don't know. But Julian Sayin looked overwhelmed. The offensive line looked overwhelmed. And that was a team that really thought they were going to win the national championship again. So that would be my vote for the biggest flop of the quarterfinals. What do you guys think?
Well, I think I took Miami in that game. I'm not sure I thought they were going to win the game, but I certainly liked the 9.5 points cushion that I got. You make a fair point, Pat. I'm not going to disagree with anything you say there. I didn't think Alabama was going to get boat raced like that. I thought Indiana would win. Again, I thought they'd keep it within the point spread. I was shocked at how absolutely awful Texas Tech's offense was. And I hate to pick on specific players, but the quarterback play for Texas Tech was abysmal. I mean, there's really no other way to describe it. And I think if you asked him yourself, he would say, yeah, I might have had my worst game ever in the biggest stage ever for me. And so just simple throws, simple play, it just wasn't there. I was just shocked at how bad Texas Tech's offense looked. And we knew going in that Texas Tech, maybe some of their scoring power was a little bit of a illusion, but it was exposed. And it was exposed in ways that I'm not sure even Texas Tech thought it could get exposed. So to me, I might argue Texas Tech's offense has really been the biggest flop.
Yeah, I certainly think on the field, Texas Tech offense. I mean, especially given the way that their defense played in that one. I mean, everybody was just kind of open eyed at how good that defense was, and those that had watched Texas Tech throughout the year, they knew that. But to have the complete no show from the offense in a game that was, let's face it, it was quite winnable for them if they had just been able to do anything on offense, sustain things. The fact that it was even that kind of score line, given those four plus turnovers. I mean that speaks to how good that defense was and how well they were playing there in Miami. And that's truthfully a reason why I thought they had a good shot in that game, because they could have made Dante Moore, and force Oregon's offense to turn the ball over and make that a close game. But to me, the biggest flop was just Ryan Day. He took over play calling before that game, and to have the offense for a second straight game, if you can count the Big Ten title game, to no show. And they'd openly talked about in that locker room going 16-0. We have the talent, we have the path to be one of those historic teams to not only go back to back, but be the first team, in modern college football to go 16-0, and to completely fall on your face like that. That prompts a little bit larger, questions about what's going on there in Columbus. Replacing one of your best recruiters, you're changing over things on offense. You're losing some talent certainly, but you do have a lot coming back, and to have a game like that out of Jeremiah Smith. If you had told somebody that he would have posted 150 plus yards receiving and scored a touchdown, you would have said, all right, they would have easily covered that 9.5 that they were given to Miami. And so to play like that with a quarterback and a Heisman finalist, and they just didn't make adjustments. They made some at halftime, but it just took too long. They were almost out of the game at that point. And then you throw in that pick six. It was just a bad day for the Ohio State offense, and I think that was probably on the grander scale, beyond just the games themselves, that was probably the biggest eye opener and the biggest flop of the postseason so far.
Pat, what do you remember what you texted me about Ohio State after that loss? I think it was something to the effect that, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this. The good thing Ohio State and Ryan Day won the national championship last year.
Oh yes, yeah, because. Yes, this would have, how they are in Columbus. He needs that chip in the back pocket because his record against Michigan isn't good. And then you finally beat Michigan, and you follow it up by losing the Big Ten championship game as a favorite, and then absolutely bombing as a favorite there. So
yeah,
as usual, nobody's ever that happy that long in Columbus. All right, let's get to the two semifinal games. Should both be really interesting. We've talked about many of the storylines and just the interesting factors here. But, Bryan, you're going to be in the desert for Ole Miss versus Miami. Both teams are playing with house money at this point, but which one's playing better?
I think it's Miami. You look at what they've done kind of the second half of the season, really since that SMU overtime loss, and there was certainly some controversy surrounding even getting to overtime there for Miami. They've been blowing teams out. Really they played the one close game against Texas A&M, and I think talking with them kind of in the lead up to the Cotton Bowl, that they were all citing the weather as maybe a bigger factor than we even kind of expected going into that. They missed a couple of field goals. That probably was not necessarily a one-score game, but they've really taken everybody and ran with it. And even not even getting the kind of caliber play you would think out of Carson Beck at quarterback, and they're still dominating teams. And that's a testament to really the entire roster, that Mario Cristobal has built. And, now there's a belief in that. They're getting contributions from all over. They're stepping up on both sides of the ball. This is an impressive group for Miami. And they're going into a team, like you said, that is playing with house money. I think Trinidad Chambliss, if you had to give me one drive at this point in the playoff, no offense to the Heisman Trophy winner, I might turn to Trinidad Chambliss. I mean, the way he really just toyed with Georgia's defense in that second half in particular was really impressive. He's such a confident young guy, and that spreads throughout the entire offense, really the entire team there at Ole Miss. They're going to come into that Fiesta Bowl, and they're going to be excited about this matchup. They know what it means. They understand all the outside noise, but they're playing pretty confident, and I think it should be a really, really fun game against two offenses that should be able to put up enough points to make this a pretty entertaining one.
Remember when during the selection process and the latter stages, some folks were arguing Ole Miss should be dropped in the rankings because Lane Kiffin is not going to coach them. And now, what are the headlines we're reading? Is Ole Miss better without Lane Kiffin? I mean, it's so absurd how these things can change. Ole Miss is a really good team with or without Lane Kiffin, and one of the reasons it's a really good team with or without him is the guy that Bryan just mentioned, Trinidad Chambliss. Miami, there is so much to like about them, and you look at their journey to this place right now, really impressive. Win at A&M, beat Ohio State, underdogs. But Ole Miss has been an underdog too and has figured out a way to do it. And I would argue in more bizarre circumstances than Miami has. What Miami did against Ohio State was incredible. But I would also argue that Julian Sayin isn't Trinidad Chambliss. And Chambliss gives Ole Miss something that Ohio State didn't have, a really mobile quarterback and a dynamic quarterback. And that's nothing against Sayin. It's everything about Chambliss. Now then, can Ole Miss's offensive line hold up? I don't know. Is Lacey going to be close to 100% or functional in this game? We're not entirely sure. But I like what Ole Miss is bringing to this game. And I like this idea of nobody believes in us. Nobody thinks we can do this. Now Miami's the favorite. I'm going to take Ole Miss and take those points. Will I be stunned if Miami wins? No. But if it's a close game, I just saw what Ole Miss's kicker did in that game. And if it's close, I'm betting on that guy. So I'll take Ole Miss in the points in this one.
All right, Gino's going ahead and making picks here. He's already picking the game.
Well, I'm just fired up, Pat. I'm sorry.
That's good. The Ole Miss story is incredible, and Trinidad Chambliss is a wizard. I mean, he's so fun to watch, and the plays he's made. And if you factor in this guy was really in Division II last year, it's just astounding because he is so good and just can conjure up stuff. It's phenomenal. I've really enjoyed watching him play, especially as the season's gone along. But to me, in terms of who's playing better, it's the team with the monster defensive line. If there's one thing that can just wreck a team that you really can't do anything about unless your quarterback's superhuman, which Chambliss may be, but it's the defensive line. If you can't run and you can't protect the quarterback, you got issues. And we'll see whether Ole Miss can handle a defensive line that has just been monsters during the playoff here. Yeah. So I'm rolling with the Hurricanes there as the team playing better at this point. Peach Bowl, Oregon, Indiana. I'm going to be there covering that one. Playoff rematches, interesting, of regular season games. I believe they are 4-0. If you go back to prior, you go back to Georgia, Alabama in 2021 and go forward from there. If you won the first meeting, you lost the second one. The question is Indiana in trouble? I don't think so, but that statistic certainly resonates. And Dan Lanning's no dummy. Oregon, I'm sure, has gone back and just scrubbed every millisecond of that film to figure out what they could do better. I was at the game. It was a good, close game. Indiana won by 10. Indiana was better in the second half and certainly better in the fourth quarter. And I believe they certainly kept Oregon out of the end zone in the second half. The Indiana defense continues to be underrated. I don't think they're in trouble, but if I'm Indiana, Curt Cignetti, who is the type of guy to stress about everything, he is stressed about what are they going to do differently? What's Oregon going to do differently and do better this time?
Well, and what personnel is going to be different. I think that's the thing for me with Oregon, that in this game in particular, you look some of their transfer portal defections, that's going to really chipped away, I think, on their defensive depth. If guys get hurt, especially in this first or second half, that could impact, I think, Oregon in a big way. They've lost, I think they're down in terms of the secondary depth, in terms of the defensive line. They rotated a lot of guys, against Texas Tech. I don't know if that was just to kind of keep them fresh, but I did notice up front front, that they were rotating maybe a little bit more than I think you would expect, if that's to prepare them for a game like this, to get them kind of ready for that game action against Indiana. And maybe that was the case for Dan Lanning and crew. And to me, let's see what the status is of Evan Stewart and some of those wide receivers at Oregon. Are they ready to go for this game? I think they have kind of been saving them. It's been always almost a daily thing in terms of checking that availability report to whether they're probable out, whatever it might be, for this game. So the personnel could end up changing from that first meeting to the second for Oregon. And that, to me, is kind of the question mark in this game. I think Oregon has enough. If Dante Moore plays like he is capable of, not what we saw against Texas Tech, but in some of those big time wins against USC, against Washington, if he plays like the first round quarterback that a lot of the NFL scouts think he is, I think this could definitely be a game to where that trend continues of these rematches. But to me, it's going to be a bigger question: is what exactly is the difference between that first meeting and the second? And Pat, not only did Indiana win by 10, but Fernando Mendoza threw a pick 6 in that one. So it's not like Oregon's offense was really able to kind of get over the hump against this Indiana defense that, like I mentioned, was number 2 in scoring defense in the country right now.
It was tied 20-20 in the fourth quarter. So if I read it correctly, you can double check it for me. But I believe it was 20-20 in the fourth quarter. So it was still a close game. IU pulled away. And Bryan, you're right. Mendoza did throw a pick 6, but Dante Moore had 2 interceptions. Can you do that against a team like Indiana and expect to win? Probably not. But you do bring up another key point, Bryan. Yes, there have been defections, but they're also getting some players that seems are trending the right way to come back, especially at the wide receiver position. So if those guys keep on making progress, that's going to be really helpful for Oregon. So, and you also have the revenge factor. And Pat, you cited that number. So does that number mean anything? I'm not sure. 4-0, is that the number that's going to define it all? I'm not sure, but certainly food for thought. And again, I think another game that is going to be interesting and close on a lot of levels. And Pat, this time I will not make the pick until you tell me to.
There we go. You're coachable.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Speaking of Indiana, we got to hit what they've done in the portal. Whoa. Cignetti. Okay. So he's had 2 contract extensions. He probably deserves 2 more. But in his 2 seasons, and when he got the first one last year, it was like in November, and he was on, I think it was Fox. I think it was maybe Big Noon Kickoff. They had him because it got announced that morning. And they were doing the publicity rounds, and he said, why would I go anywhere else? We're the emerging superpower in college football. And the crew that was interviewing him actually laughed. And now maybe we're not laughing anymore. Certainly the record is what it is. But here's what they've done in the portal just over the weekend for 2026. They have signed 7 players in one day, including top quarterback Josh Hoover from TCU, who's the top yardage quarterback, I believe, for next year, still playing college football. Okay. Top wide receiver Nick Marsh from Michigan State, who is excellent. Running back Turbo Richard from Boston College, had over 700 yards rushing this year. And 4 defensive players from power conference teams. Gino, is this a definitive sign that IU is a long-term heavyweight?
Sure. I mean, define long-term. I mean, these days in college football, does long-term mean 3 years, 5 years? But in context of where we are in college football right now, it absolutely speaks to where IU is as far as the trust level of players being willing. They see the success. They see Mendoza come from Cal, go to IU and win a Heisman Trophy. They see what that defense can do. They see what those wide receivers have done, which is why I assume the Michigan State players coming over, Marsh, and just the power of Cignetti, really more than anything, is he has made all these players believe in his model. We are going to coach you up. We're going to pay you enough. we've got a great infrastructure now, and we win, and we're not scared of anybody, and we're in the Big Ten. So I think those are a lot of factors that are driving these players toward IU. So yeah, long term in the context of where we are in the world of college football today, absolutely.
Well, and getting back to our earlier point, what is a heavyweight nowadays? I mean, you kind of got to redefine things in this era of college football. I mean, Texas Tech has also gone on quite a run. They got Brendan Sorsby, which we'll talk about later. So like, there's a lot of these programs that are using this playoff success, and they're turning it in and saying, here's proof of concept, and here's also a bag of cash. And that has been attractive to a lot of these guys in the portal. And I think that is why a lot of these teams have hope, certainly, but also a kind of a reflection that is a new era. I mean, these guys are going out and choosing Indiana, which is not something you would have thought. And even going back last year, they had a great season. It was not like they were getting guys, Fernando Mendoza was not the best quarterback in the portal if you looked at a lot of the recruiting services. They went out and got Pat Coogan from Notre Dame, right? He was kind of surplus to requirements there, but they fit Cignetti's system. And I think that's the key with this run being sustained there in Bloomington is, Curt Cignetti he's got roster control. He's one of those head coaches, if they're in the NFL, he's got control over the 54, right? He understands what fits his system. He finds those guys and he goes out and lands them. I mean, that to me was not only the most impressive part about landing some of these guys, man, as soon as that portal window opened, boom, 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 they're committing to Indiana. Like they understood what was out there. They understood who their guys were going to be. They locked them up pretty quickly. And this was an impressive roster overhaul. And you add into that, this is why, and Pat, we were going back to our preseason predictions, and you have an IU at number 4. All right, this is going to lend into some credence next year. All right, a lot, Indiana's not going to, they're going to appear on just about everybody's, preseason top 25, that we released right after the national title game. They're going to be up there in the top 5 because of a lot of these guys. And I think if you're talking about sustaining this and being a long-term heavyweight, that's probably the biggest sign of respect is now we're respecting Indiana. The players are there, the coach is there. Now we're finally respecting the program overall moving forward. And that's probably the biggest thing for a lot of folks there in Bloomington that's saying, hey, we can keep this going.
Yeah. I mean, it was a huge statement that to be able to do that while you're trying to chase the first national championship you've ever come close to was an impressive sign of organization and knowing what you want and what you need. Now, they have a lot of playing time to sell because they do have a lot of guys that are leaving. But if you're Josh Hoover, you're looking to say, yeah, that guy won the Heisman. He's going to be a first-round pick. If you're Nick Marsh, you're saying, well, they got 2 guys that are probably going to get drafted at receiver and maybe drafted highly in Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper. Why wouldn't you want to go play there? My only small concern, and I don't think this is like a legitimate worry, but is Indiana has done what it has done with a bunch of guys that were overachievers and were, just massive workers and character guys and locker room guys. That's not to say these guys aren't, but it's going to be different because you're bringing in established power conference standouts, and we'll see if they're going to mesh as well as the guys from James Madison and the holdovers from bad Indiana, and the guys from the MAC and whatever did. So that's my only small quibble there because we got to quibble with something. It's what we.
Well, if really quick, I'll throw 2 other things in there. Can you keep on doing this without? And I don't know what their recruiting was like. I should have looked at their rankings for whatever those are worth. If we've learned anything, rankings don't mean anything a lot of times. But I don't know how Indiana is building its recruiting from the high school level, developing talent, and 2. Cignetti's going to have to keep on turning over his roster every year, and he's going to have to hit. And this goes for a lot of coaches, not just IU and Cignetti. But if you're turning over that amount of roster every year, you got to get it right a lot of times. And so he has to get it right, especially in those key positions. The players you mentioned coming there, all really good players. Some of them great players. And obviously have hit from a production standpoint, but he's going to have to keep on doing that to be successful. So that's why I asked you what long-term really means these days.
Yeah, long-term means nothing, basically.
Okay.
we're not going to have time to talk about this because we've gone deep, which I think is good. But Brendan Sorsby also is leaving Cincinnati to go to Texas Tech, and that is kind of the same thing. Novo Reich School, Red Raiders picking up a really high quality, proven quarterback. He's staying in the Big 12, going from Cincinnati to Texas Tech, which I think is big for the league. But that's another sign. Like Texas Tech, they're all in, and they're going to stay all in until they, until further notice. So
5 million, is that the number I saw?
Who knows, man?
Who knows?
I tend not to believe any of the portal numbers. I
Yeah.
mean, it may be accurate, but I mean, they are throwing some cash, some major bags around in Lubbock. All right, we got to pick the games, and then we got to get to some New Year's resolutions here. An update of the standings. Bryan Fischer's lead is down to a single game.
Oh boy.
You're going 1-3 against the spread in the semis.
Oof.
I'm right there behind him. He can hear my footsteps. Gene, still trying to get back to 500, 42-45. I'm 43-43. Bryan is 44-42. The Bear is not helping you enough at this point.
2-2. I'm proud of that.
Fine. That's fine.
Okay.
All right. Fiesta Bowl. Ole Miss getting 3.5 against Miami. Bryan, where are you landing?
Well, much like being chased by a bear, you don't have to be last. That's the key in this contest, is not being that one. So I will go with Miami. I think they are the superior team overall. I hesitate though to pick against Trinidad Chambliss, but if anything, that shuttling, the lack of focus on the game on Ole Miss's part in terms of the preparation in this one, that to me says maybe this is where that shows up. And as maybe there's just the familiarity of playing against Georgia, a team they already played against earlier in the season. They had the game plans already kind of set. They could adjust as needed. The preparation factor I don't think was as big a deal as it is going into this Fiesta Bowl, where Miami is totally all in and focused. And keep in mind, they are also playing for the right to play for the national title on their home field. In their home city, in their home practice facility, that I think that means a lot to those Hurricane players, especially given the ties they have to South Florida. I think they will come out prepared in this one. I could see it turning into a bit of a back and forth game. As good as the defensive line is for Miami, Trinidad Chambliss is that good, but I think they end up covering that 3.5.
We know Gene's in on the Rebels, right?
I was a time saver.
There you go. Right. Okay. I'm taking the Hurricanes here. I think it's going to be a great game. I am, like I said, I'm riding with the defensive line. I think that's a game-wrecking strength that they have. And if you turn Ole Miss completely one-dimensional, and we're not sure about Lacey's health, and I am very impressed with what Carson Beck did against Ohio State. Game manager's a bit of a pejorative these days, but he managed that game beautifully. Made the plays he had to make when he had to make them, and I think the defense can take care of the rest. So I'm rolling with the Hurricanes there. Peach Bowl, Oregon only getting 4 now against Indiana. That again was a 10-point game in Eugene. I think you could probably drop that about in half or maybe down to 6 in the rematch situation here. But 4 is still, I'll be happy to take 4 or give 4 with Indiana. I think the Hoosiers have proven themselves time and time again. And I just don't think there's any way Cignetti allows any kind of waiver in focus and effort and preparedness. So I think the Hoosiers win and cover.
Well, I will take Oregon and take those points. I do think it'll be closer than you think, Pat. And now, as I said with Bama, you can't go down 17-0 against IU like they did against Oklahoma and expect to win. And the same goes with Oregon. Dante Moore, you can't throw 2 interceptions and expect to beat Indiana. But I do think that Lanning will play the revenge card with everything he has. And I do think we saw a huge difference in the defensive intensity of Oregon versus JMU and then their next game. And I think you'll see increased intensity on the defensive side. Oregon is good enough, and I think matches up pretty well with Indiana. And so I'm gonna take a flyer on the Ducks and take those 4 points.
Yeah, I know it's 4, but it feels like a coin flip game. Just the rematch element, the way Oregon is playing, the talent that they have on that roster, how motivated I'm sure they can get. Dan Lanning can get those boys, but yeah, give me the 4 points for Indiana. I mean, like I said, top 3 scoring offense and defense. The way they are playing, the execution though, I think that's the thing that if you could trust anything in this playoff, it's the Hoosiers' execution, not self-destructing. I think Oregon's almost good for a play or two where they get the ball over, or they commit a bad penalty that leads to a touchdown. I think that's the one thing that does kind of hold me back from the Ducks. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see them in Miami in a couple of weeks, but give me the Hoosiers just the way they are playing right now. I think they can cover the 4.
All right, picks are in. We'll see where they land in a few days here.
Bryan protecting his 1-game lead.
Yeah, you're right. Interesting. That's the strategy looks clear.
Game theory, right?
Game theory.
All right, let's get out of here on this note. This was Gene's suggestion. Some New Year's resolutions. And I resolved to listen to Gene for the first time here in 2026. So
thank you.
We're going to do them. Lead us off, Gino. What are your New Year's resolutions? My New Year's resolutions, I'm not engaging with anybody who says Alabama shouldn't have been in the CFP. If the Notre Dame athletic director says they were good enough to be in it, then I agree with them. 2, can someone, I'm not going to try to understand when we went from they need 3 yards for a first down to they need 3 yards for the line to gain. When did we start saying the line to gain? I don't get it. I don't want to hear it anymore. I'm not acknowledging it. I'm still a first down guy. And 3rd, I'm never reading another story that begins with the headline, "Is Arch Manning college football's first flop?" So those are my 3 New Year's resolutions. Go at it. Bryan?
That's tough to follow. I think going back to our preseason predictions, I'm not going to trust returning starters ever again after seeing what Clemson did this year, after seeing what Penn State did this year. Like I'm over that. I think we kind of overvalued that. You looked at what Texas kind of had coming back. That was kind of another red flag. You could have said, all right, maybe we should have leaned into that a little bit more. In terms of not having them quite as highly rated in the preseason. So that might be resolution number 1 for 2026, looking ahead to the actual season itself. I'm not going to value that. I am going to value coaches, though. I think that we've proven that the last couple of years. If you have a good coach, you can make some hay, not only getting to the playoff, but potentially winning some games as well. So that might be those 2 I'll lean into, coaching and not valuing the returning starters.
Good one. Yeah. I'm thinking along your lines because my resolution, I am never picking Penn State number 1 again, and I'm never believing in James Franklin. No, James Franklin's a good coach, but I'm never picking his team number 1. Sorry, Virginia Tech. It might mean you actually win a national title now because I refuse to do it. You could have 22 returning starters and the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback. I'm not picking you. So let's just start with that there. I do resolve to not hex myself in game on Twitter by declaring that a game is over or somebody looks terrible and then they turn around and play great. Yeah. I have a renowned track record of doing exactly that. So I'm going to try to hold my fire a little bit more there. And I resolved to actually be a little bit nicer to you two. Maybe I'll ease up on my critiques of you, my scathing critiques so that I've given you two behind the scenes. Actually, not really. But anyway, that's the show for this week. First one of the year in the books. Enjoy the semifinals, everybody. And we will be back next week to talk about those and then look ahead at the final. Talk to you later.